Welcome. This webinar is brought to you by the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders. You can access the recording of this webinar on our website at www.nhadaca.org within our webinar library. After completing this webinar, please complete the quiz and evaluation if you're interested in receiving a certificate. If you're a member of NHCORR or NADAC, the certificate for this webinar is free. If you are not a member, the fee is $15. You'll receive a certificate worth 1 continuing education credit once you have completed the evaluation, passed the quiz, and paid for the webinar if applicable. Through the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders, this 1-hour event is pre-approved by the New Hampshire Board of Licensing for alcohol and other drug use professionals as well as NBCC. If you have any trouble viewing the webinar, have audio problems, or have any technical questions, please contact us at 603-225-7060. Please email any questions regarding the material you see today to training@nhadaca.org.
Hello, my name is Kim Bach, and I'm the Executive Director with the New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences. And today I'd like to talk about how to choose the best fit recovery residence for your loved one or your client. We are the New Hampshire Coalition of Recovery Residences, NHCORR, and we are the state affiliate of the National Alliance of Recovery Residences, also known as NARR. And what we do, we certify that houses meet the NARR standards, and the NARR standards are accepted by SAMHSA, and they're also recognized by Congress. So they're well-vetted standards. We bring best practices to housing operators through education. We also educate and advocate at all levels in local, state, federal governments. Anybody who wants to listen, to learn more, we'll talk to communities, we'll talk to neighbors, we'll talk to anybody who wants to hear Rotary clubs about recovery housing and how helpful they are. We offer an ombudsman service that is, if someone has a complaint about a recovery house, we'll listen to that complaint, we'll try and mediate a solid resolution. And we have a housing assistance program where we offer housing assistance for people entering recovery homes. As I said, we certify that recovery houses in New Hampshire meet nationally recognized NARR standards. They need to operate ethically in the best interest of the resident, under the social model of recovery, and in a safe environment. Certification is voluntary. It's not required in New Hampshire. Houses come to NHCORR to receive certification that assures the public of best practices. As I said, it's not required. Currently, there are funding streams that encourage certification in New Hampshire, but most oftenly, house operators want to use best practices and be able to advertise that they do recovery housing right. That is the biggest thing that drives recovery houses in New Hampshire to get certified. They want a seal of approval. They also very much appreciate the coalition that we've put together. When recovery housing was really getting off the ground, when NHCORR was getting off the ground in New Hampshire, recovery houses were operating as individual entities, and there wasn't a lot of communication between them. NHCORR has managed to build a strong coalition where recovery house operators now know each other and they turn to each other for advice and for best practice. Our best practices in education. We offer education through operator roundtables. We started those during COVID, the beginning of COVID. At that time, we were doing an operator roundtable every single week. We then changed to monthly as people got more comfortable with operation during COVID. And now we've moved to quarterly to more educational format. We run a leadership development program for house leaders, not operators. And that runs twice a month in the evening. We touch on lots of different subjects, but practical aspects of trying to work with everyday issues within a house. So we started, our first one was, how do you keep the dirty dishes out of the sink? Always frustration. And we get pretty serious in as far as what do we do if someone passes away while they're in your house? What's important about our leadership development program is to recognize that house leaders are always someone who, in New Hampshire, they're always somebody who's in program. And their own recovery is as important as everyone else's in the house. So we want to make sure their recovery is also recognized and that they have self-care as their leader. We advocate at the local, state, and federal level. I work with all sorts of different agencies across New Hampshire. I work with the New Hampshire Building Officials Association, with the New Hampshire Planners Association, with the State Fire Marshal's Office. I'll work with anybody who wants to work with me to promote recovery housing and to get better understanding of recovery and reduce stigma. We do house visits during our certification process. And when we do the house visits, we often find that there's an opportunity for education. There's an opportunity to say this needs to be adjusted or that needs to be adjusted, and to give the reasons why. And we also do documentation reviews. So we spend about a month reviewing every single document that covers recovery housing for that particular recovery house. We make sure that everything follows in our standard, and we work back and forth with the recovery house. It's not a pass or fail system. It's a workable situation where we talk about philosophies. Why do they have their policies written in a particular manner? What do we find is problematic with that? Is it something that could be adjusted without changing their philosophy? It's important to recognize that every house is unique. Every house has a distinct personality. And that distinct personality is developed from the owner's personality, the demographic that they choose to serve, the location of the house, and the financing structure. While that's true that every house is unique, most NHCORR certified houses follow very similar rules and regulations. So you'll find that rules and regulations as they're written out will look very similar, but the way the whole house feels when you're in the house is very, very different. I compare that to my my upbringing. My mom and her sister obviously were brought up in the same house. I had to follow very similar rules as my cousins, but my mom's house is very structured and very formal. And my aunt's house was always very open and very loose and very informal. So houses are similar. Demographics. So who gets served in New Hampshire? Approximately 27% of the NHCORR certified recovery houses are for people who identify as female. We have 2 certified houses today for women with children. We would love to see more than that. So in New Hampshire, houses accept people who identify as female or identify as male or women with children. At this moment, there are no houses for couples. There are no houses that are mixed gender houses. There are no houses that are specifically set up for people identifying in the LGBTQ+ community. No houses for men with children, and no houses for English language learners. These are all places where we feel we could develop more housing. Houses are able to set their own religious parameters.
If there's religious parameters within a house, is that something that is researchable prior, like while you're figuring out what the best fit is? Is that something that's archived? Like, do you have that information?
I'll show you how we're going to research a house. And yes, we send you directly to their website.
Great.
And their website has to be fairly clear on what's happening within that house. And houses that have religious practices involved, they don't hide that.
Right.
They're proud of that. That's their pathway, and they're proud of that. And they feel that that's what works best for the people they serve.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean for everybody. It just means for the people that choose to come and live with them. And they don't want someone to come in that doesn't want to live in that fashion.
Right.
Because that won't serve that person, and it won't be a comfortable situation for everybody else in the house. It'll be challenging for everybody.
Yeah.
So business model. What do recovery houses look like in New Hampshire? It's different in every state, and we find it very different in New Hampshire than, say, in Vermont. In New Hampshire, recovery housing is typically run by a for-profit LLC. Remember, though, that nonprofit status is just a tax structure. It does not establish an altruistic nature of a business. It doesn't, a nonprofit is no better than a for-profit. It all depends on the ethics of the person that's running the business. House organizations in New Hampshire are typically small. You can see from the graph that there are about 18 house organizations that own 1, 2, or 3 houses. And then it jumps up and we have a small group of organizations that own 4, 5, 6, or 7 houses. We have one house that has 10 houses, one organization that has 10 houses, and we have another organization that has 18, and now I think they're up to 20 houses. So most operators are running a very small organization, and that would mean that they are also working a 40-hour-a-week job outside of the house. Operators in New Hampshire typically have lived experiences. There are exceptions, but that's what we typically see. So if a person has a one-house operation, the owner, you'll notice that the owner is working full-time at another occupation. The owner is present in the recovery house on a daily basis, typically. The owner has a structure of house leaders who voluntarily take on responsibility as part of the recovery plan to help with the house. So in that case, you would see the owner / operator. You wouldn't necessarily see paid staff, but you'd see a few house leaders, and then you would see the residents underneath the house leaders. That would be the typical structure you would see. If an operator owns an organization has 5 or more houses, then the owner may not be quite as visible in each house. The owner is going to rely on staff, and that would be paid staff, and then on house leadership for the daily operation of the house. And remember that every house is unique. We also like to remind people that the setting is the service. It's the house, not the building so much, but it's the atmosphere. It's the family atmosphere. That is how recovery houses serve people in recovery. And all of these images are images of certified houses in New Hampshire. So you can see that they're all pretty different. There's the Mallee Farm, which is a beautiful old estate, really, on a huge piece of land, very, very private. There is something that looks far more like a modern apartment complex, and there's a repurposed strip motel. Inside should be comfortable and cozy. They're traditional New England houses. These are all recovery houses. So what does a recovery home look like? There is no set model. In New Hampshire, it could be an old house or a new house, a repurposed motel, like I showed you in the last picture. It could be a repurposed rectory, an apartment building, a duplex, a triple decker, a single family house, a repurposed nursing home, a mill owner's mansion, a lakeside resort. All of those things can qualify as recovery housing. What really matters is what's on the inside. On the inside, there has to be a kitchen with storage space for everyone. There has to be a dining area with seats for everyone. And that does not necessarily mean a dining room with a table and chairs. That just means a place where people are going to gather to eat. So it's also okay to say that is the living room area, and everybody pulls up an arm of the couch and a plate, or they're going to have a seat on the floor, or all of that is okay. It has to be a family type gathering. There needs to be a living room with seats for everybody to gather, to be social. Bedrooms should not have locks on the doors. And there should be plenty of personal storage space for each person within the bedroom. So the standards say there needs to be 50 square feet per person in every bedroom. There should be plenty of bathrooms for everyone in the house. The standards say there needs to be 1 sink, 1 toilet, and 1 shower for every 6 people. And there has to be a layout that encourages people to interact with each other as a family. We always tell operators they want to encourage people to get out of the bedroom and go to the common area. We want a home atmosphere. We want to generate that atmosphere of a busy family life where everybody's hanging out in the kitchen or everybody's hanging out in the living room doing things together. Even if they're doing their own step work, we want to see them together and not isolated in their bedrooms. How does recovery work? Whoops, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go forward on a slide. How well does a recovery house work? What we understand is that a person who leaves treatment and secures a place in a recovery house has a 60% greater chance of attaining and maintaining long-term recovery than someone who cannot do that. What's important is the social model. If someone were to return to their own home, the social model is still important. So if they have really solid home life that it follows a social model, again, a solid family lifestyle, recovery is really possible. Recovery homes, they work to develop and maintain that social model. The other thing that helps recovery houses work is fellowship. So how recovery happens, the graph on this page, first you see an acute problem, and that may have somebody end up in the ER and detox, hospitalization, residential treatment, and that's really acute. That might last for 30 days or so. At the end of that acute period of time, a person may go to what we would call a level 4 house, and that is maybe a licensed facility. As they progress in recovery, then their need for services, it still exists, but it declines. And we see that our recovering houses can offer different levels of support. The goal, always, the goal is long-term recovery. And that is, for us, that means independent, meaningful living in a community. Our house models follow that similar curve. So rules are developed following the NARR Code of Ethics. All houses that are certified must be alcohol and drug-free living environments. They all must follow the social model of recovery. A level 1 house is like an Oxford house model, and has the least amount of support and the least amount of oversight. Typically, people that are appropriate for a level 1 house have a high amount of recovery capital, and they don't need a lot of support services. As their need for support services increases, then we increase the level number. So a level 2 house will start adding some support services. So all houses are going to have weekly meetings. A level 2 may start requirements for the number of outside meetings that a fellowship that someone may have to attend. A level 3 house is going to start to incorporate life skills development. That may be how to craft your resume, how to re-educate yourself to get a more sustainable job. It could be working on child reunification or making that possible. The house operator doesn't actually provide that service, but they'll make that possible. They'll accommodate that. So life skills development happens more in a level 3, but it could be overlapping into level 2. Level 2 and 3 are a little squishy. And level 4 for us is a clinical atmosphere, so that it's a licensed facility. But we can also, and we have 2 level 4 houses that we have certified in New Hampshire. So someone looking to find the right recovery house needs to assess each potential resident's needs and determine whether that level of support is appropriate. Does that house have the ability to provide the assistance to the resident, or should that person be referred out to a different residence, to a higher level of care or a lower level of care? Houses must value diversity and non-discrimination. So NHCORR certified recovery homes are committed to providing equal access to housing and recovery services for all persons in recovery. At the same time, NHCORR values demographic and pathway specific homes as vital components of a strong and effective coalition, and respects the need and right of a home to serve a demographic or pathway specific population. The coalition allows for NHCORR certified recovery homes to refer prospective residents to better fit homes based on demographics or pathways. So back to that religious pathway, or maybe someone wants to follow only smart recovery in their house, or only the 12-step program. That is okay, as long as they are well aware of all of the other houses within the coalition. And if they get an applicant that says, I want to do smart recovery, but all you're looking at is art recovery, the art recovery house knows how to refer a person to smart recovery. Typically, though, what we see is people are open to all pathways. A house needs to provide a safe, home-like environment, places for people to gather, a place for people to come home from their day, whatever that happens to be, and where they can feel safe and confident. The house needs to be clean and in good repair. Ultimately, it has to be an alcohol and illicit drug-free environment. So we are always concerned that the house is trying to build recovery capital. We know that there is essential ingredients for sustained recovery. And again, it kind of goes along with our 4 levels of support, but we know that recovery requires safe and affordable housing. It requires, and the houses require, steady employment and job readiness. It may mean that there are education and vocational skills that need to be developed to do that. As you go up in levels of houses, as I said before, it may mean a development of life and recovery skills. Health and wellness is something that every person in recovery should be monitoring and working on. So we can't ignore health and wellness issues at all. There should be support to find supportive services to deal with health and wellness issues. Recovery support networks have to be available that are appropriate for the person in the house. So a level 1 house, again, has a higher, the resident should have a higher level of recovery capital and may not need so many supportive services. A level 4 house probably has the supportive services within the organization, but a level 2 and 3 house, you really want to look at what types of recovery supports does your particular client need and match them to the right house. People in recovery housing need to have a sense of belonging and of purpose, and the purpose is, again, goes back to education, vocational skills, steady employment, volunteer work. They also need to learn how to re-engage in community activities. So initially that's going to be fellowship type meetings, but we would like to see that grow as they grow in their recovery capital and they grow in their time within the recovery house to outside community engagement that isn't necessarily recovery focused, but is a place to learn how to be in community and maintain the recovery at the same time. So that could include libraries, art museums, festivals. It could be going to maker spaces in different communities. There's a lot of ideas of what community engagement could be. So again, recovery housing is based on evidence-based models and theories. Recovery capital is about what do I need to build to sustain my recovery. So we know that unmet needs and barriers are not going to build recovery capital. They're going to remove recovery capital, and that could lead to reuse. So we want to build personal strength, social strengths, community strengths, emotional commitment, and well-being. Those are the goals of a recovery house. We follow a lot of the work of Dr. David Best from Scotland. And this is something that I took from one of his presentations, honestly. And he talks about recovery capital as being at 3 different levels. So there's the recovery capital of the individual. And that's typically what people are looking at when they're in treatment. And there's the social recovery capital, and we would say that that is outside of their home environment. That would be fellowship meetings, that might be church, that could be the library, that could, whatever that happens to be, the social recovery capital. And then there's community recovery capital, and that's a recovery home. And Dr. Best presents this ice cream cone model as, if we're focusing on treatment, we're focusing on the one person at the bottom of the cone, at the bottom of recovery capital potentially. But if we can bring that person up into the community group, they all rise to that level together, and they all sustain each other at that level of recovery capital. And that's one of the real beauties of recovery in a recovery home, where fellowship happens, where everybody is focusing on recovery. As Dr. David Best would say, the sprinkles on the top of the cone is the whole community has well-being then. The neighbors have a good neighbor beside them they can rely on. They know the house is going to be well kept. They know that there are going to be curfews. There's not going to be foul language outside the house. They know that the people in the house are not using illicit drugs or alcohol. And that's just like the sprinkles, the glitter on the top of the cone. I think that we went over this pretty well. So how do I select a recovery house for my client? I would suggest that you start off by looking at the NHCORR.org website. We have an accepting new residents platform. And my plan is to take you to the website. But the accepting new residents platform narrows down the list of certified recovery houses to ones that are saying that they absolutely are ready to take a new application. Doesn't mean that your resident would be accepted. It doesn't mean that your client would be accepted. Doesn't mean it would be a good fit for that person, but it's a place to start. On I don't know, October 18th or 19th, when I put this slide together, this was the list of recovery housing that was accepting new residents. You can see there's a pin on the map to show you where the house is. The pins are color coded, and that relates to the demographic of the house. The chart tells you the name of the house, and it tells you the last time that the data was updated. This data will always be up to date. If the data is more than 2 weeks old, then the house gets dropped off the platform. For a house to update their data is really simple. We send them an email with a link to the platform and remind them, it's time to update your data. They click on the email, it brings them right to their page, they put a number in, and they close it up. And it's done. So it's really easy for them to do.
I think you answered this question before. So I see that there's male only and female only. Are there any mixed gender houses in New Hampshire?
Not currently in New Hampshire.
Okay.
There are in other states. So it might be appropriate to look, if you're working with a particular client, it might be appropriate to look out of state and look at, there are state affiliates in every New England state for NARR certified homes.
Oh, great.
According to the NARR model. And I think there are about 35 NARR affiliates across the United States, and they're growing quickly.
Awesome.
So you can find that in other states as well. NARR is also working on a platform to get us all affiliates together with all of certified recovery residences on one website that's similar to what I have here. It's different, it's similar.
Great.
So if I can step out of this for a moment and bring you to our website, I can show you how to navigate. So this is the homepage for the NHCORR website. And if you look at the residences tab, the first thing that I have coming up is certified NHCORR residences. And this is the same format, but this is all of the certified residences. And I'll just give a quick explanation. The pins, we give one pin to every organization. If we gave a pin for every single house, then especially in a place like Manchester or Nashua, the organization that has 10 or 20 houses would completely cover the map, and the organization that only has one house would be lost. So we try to make those one-offs a little bit more apparent. So an organization gets a pin for a women's house, a group of women's houses, or a group of men's houses. This map is designed so that you can only dive down just so far. That's it. I can't focus in any closer. And we do that for the protection of the people in recovery. We do not want the actual location of the house to be apparent. That could put the people in the house in jeopardy. So we're careful about that. The chart on the side shows you how many level 1 houses we have certified at the moment. Today we have 2. Remember, level 1 is very unstructured, very little supervision. We have 64 level 2 houses. We have 18 level 3 houses, and we have 2 level 4 houses. That's the total capacity that those houses serve. There are 28 houses for people identifying as female and 58 houses for people identifying as male today. So that's 86 houses total, and that serves over 1,000 people, which we are pretty proud of. That's come a long way in a very short time. This, again, below is the listing of every single recovery house that is certified today. And if you click on, you'll see that the names I can hover over. And if I click on the name of the house, it will eventually take me to the website for that particular house. And this is where you want to start to dive in and take a look at what does it look like? What is the presentation on the cover? So this one is, they have 2 homes. One is for men, one is for women. They are located over in Hampton. You can see they have the NHCORR badge on their website saying that they are certified. You can only get that badge if you have gone through our certification process. They talk about some of their program activities. And there's an overall feeling about what this looks like. You can investigate every website further to get more information. Again, so this is some interior pictures of the home. Gives you an idea of what it feels like. They're telling you that it's 10 miles from the Massachusetts border and the Maine border, and just a quick bike ride to the beach. So it tells you a little bit about it. They have a no tolerance of drugs or alcohol policy. You must do chores while you're living there, work no less than 32 hours per week, have a healthy recovery focused routine. So they're looking to try and help you maintain your sobriety and to live a balanced, happy, and healthy life. They do have random and regular drug testing, and you must attend recovery meetings at nearby locations. They'll also support you to help find employment. One of the requirements for coming in is 28 days of sobriety. And they have a strict curfew in place to support a healthy lifestyle. Okay, so that's just a little bit about that particular home. Clearly, there's a lot more to investigate. I only clicked on one tab. Now, if you want to know who's accepting new applications, click on the accepting new residents page, and you'll see it's a very similar page, but it's now limited only to the houses that are stating that they will accept a new application. Now we are down to 14 residents. 11 are level 2s, 3 are level 3s. Now that doesn't mean that some of the houses on that other list aren't accepting applications. They may be, but they've chosen for whatever reason not to update their information on this platform. We have 4 houses that accept women, and we have 10 houses that are accepting men. And these are the houses. It's very important to see, we give slightly different information here. We're telling you the name of the house, the town it's located in. This one happens to be for men only. It's a level 3 house. The last time they updated their information was December 26th, so that's pretty current. And you can see that whole list. Again, if you hover here, you can click and go directly to the website. The other thing you can do is go into the map. Again, you can see there are different color pins. One is for men's houses, one is for women's houses. I don't want to click on Magnolia House again on you. So if I come here, I see that there's a house at the Freeman House, and there's also the Freeman House. One is men and one is women. That's the male only house. Maybe I'm looking for women housing. So I'll click on the Freeman House. So I can get to the website for the Freeman House or for any house, either from the map, the pin on the map, or from the list. Totally different looking house. This happens to be one of the men's houses. That's another one of the men's houses. A different style to the website. You can see that they're going to feel a little different inside. This is the website specifically for the women's house, the inside of the women's house. They've got a few pictures. I don't know why they're dark, but they are. They've got a few pictures of the interior, which gives you a real indication of what does it feel like in that house. I'm hoping what you see is that it's very homey. It's a nice, comfortable place to live. What can you expect from the program? So here they're giving you the opportunity to look at the objectives. They are strong with the 12 steps of AA. Doesn't mean that's the only pathway they'll accept, but that's one that they are very strong with. They are telling you, again, you're going to need to do chores. There'll be mandatory house meetings. There will be a curfew. You may have visitors with pre-approval. They expect you to respect the other residents and the neighbors, and they will work through conflicts as they arise, as any family, any healthy family will do. Program requirements, again, seek God in this particular house. Maintain sobriety, work through the 12 steps of AA or NA or HA, satisfy all recovery responsibilities, maintain employment, maintain good financial standing, and volunteer in the community. So that's what, in a quick little nutshell, this is what they require. This is what they expect and what you can expect. If you're ready to apply, there's a button to go ahead and request that application. You never come back through NHCORR to do that. So that's how you navigate our site and how you start looking at the different programs across New Hampshire. The next thing, back to this presentation, that I thought would be worthwhile is to look at some examples and to take a few minutes with each potential client and explore the NHCORR website and the individual house websites where you think a client might be placed. So my suggestion would be to take a moment with the description of the person, which I'll put up next, pause the video, and go explore the website and see what kind of things are you looking at. Why would you pick a particular house over another house? Is it availability? Is it the services that are available locally? You always want to notice if a house is remotely located, maybe there aren't as many services that the person needs. That's very important. It may be family needs, that they want to stay in a particular area, or they want to get away from a particular area. Also important. So that's my suggestion, is read about the person that's described, turn off the video or pause it, do a little research, come up with your own list of concerns and your own ideas of where to send the person, and then we'll kind of do a group discussion. So the first person that we've created for you, these are not real people, is Sarah. Sarah's a 30-year-old female who currently lives in Lebanon, New Hampshire. She has 2 children under the age of 12. Sarah has custody of the children, but they live with her mom in Lebanon. Sarah would like to stay close to Lebanon. She has used opioids. Sarah has identified the following supports needed. She needs IOP, she needs a get well job, she needs health care, she needs her license or an ID, and she also needs eventually sustainable income to support her family. So in all of these scenarios, assuming all of the certified houses have space, where would you recommend Sarah look for housing? How would you help Sarah? So at this point, I would suggest you pause, go search through first the NHCORR website and go to particular houses and see what you can find that would satisfy Sarah's needs. So considerations for Sarah. There's no certified recovery housing, NHCORR certified recovery housing for women west of I-93 in New Hampshire currently. That's a huge limitation. It's something that we're actively working on. But today, there's no housing west of I-93 for women. Maybe you look to Vermont. Maybe there's something close enough in Vermont. Maybe Sarah would be willing to relocate to another area of New Hampshire. Maybe Littleton would be close enough. Maybe Sarah's going to say, I need to go to Manchester or Concord. Or maybe go all the way to Dover if that's what looks like the right fit. That's challenging because Sarah has children and Sarah wants to stay in contact with those children. That's one of the things that is a real barrier for women to get into recovery housing. It's not located in the place where they can maintain their relationship with their children. Sarah appears to need a lot of guidance. So I would consider possibly a level 3 house. And I would try and help narrow the choices and then bring Sarah on board to select a few houses to interview. Remember that Sarah is going to be interviewing the houses and the houses are going to interview Sarah. Sarah wants to know that it's a good fit, that yes, she, not just, oh yes, I can do that because I'm going to change, but I could be there and I could feel okay. I can learn and grow there. And the house needs to know that Sarah is going to be a nice fit within the whole community. The next person to consider is Max. So Max is a 50-year-old male who lives in Derry. Max is estranged from a 16-year-old child who lives in Keene. He's identified addiction issues with alcohol and cocaine. He's also identified that he needs supportive services that include the following: license, transportation to work, and by the way, Max is a lawyer in Derry. He has been court ordered to a recovery home. He would like to work on reunification with his child. So what are the considerations for Max? Again, I would suggest you pause the video, take a look at houses and see what might be a good fit for Max. Considerations, and I'm sure that you'll come up with more than I've listed. Currently, there is only one recovery house for men in Rockingham County, and it's located in Hampton. That's about 40 minutes from Derry. That's quite a ways. So Rockingham County may not work. You'll need to check with the court order to see if he can move out of the county. But that's a huge distance from Derry for work. Manchester is only about 20 minutes. That might be a better choice. Location. That's going to be critical, I think, for somebody in a profession such as Max has. So he may be more comfortable in some areas of Manchester than in other areas. So be really sensitive to the house atmosphere. You want to make sure that any person you're trying to help place into recovery homes is comfortable in the neighborhood that they're located in. Max might feel, if he's living in the Tree Street area in Manchester, he might feel very insecure and at risk. But living on the North End might feel very comfortable. That may be the opposite for other people. And you need to keep that into consideration. Most houses will accommodate people for child reunification visits when that person is working with outside support. Susie. Susie is a 20-year-old woman who is currently located in Portsmouth. She does not have children. She'd like to stay in Portsmouth to be near her boyfriend, who's been identified as abusive to her. Susie has identified addiction to all substances. She has also identified a need for support with work, with a license, with a car, with relationships, and with work skills. So I'd suggest you pause the video, take a good look at what would be available potentially for Susie, and what would you suggest that she look at? Again, it's important to remember that it might be easy to think about, or easier to think about, sending Susie or any one of these scenarios to a particular house and say, this is the right fit for you. But the right fit has to be identified by the person. It has to be a self-driven choice, or it won't stick and it won't work. So considerations. There are several NHCORR certified recovery houses for women in the area, but not specifically in Portsmouth. We have houses in Hampton, Somersworth, Dover, and Rochester for women. I would consider talking with Susie's counselor to determine what distance from the boyfriend is in Susie's best interest. Too close could be damaging. Too far might be cause for Susie to leave the recovery house. So that would be something that I'd be trying to work with other people to figure out, where is Susie's range? What would be healthy for Susie? And again, I would narrow her housing choices and determine the amount of direction and support that is most helpful to Susie. There are some houses that are very structured, very rigorous rules. And there are some houses that, although they still have rigorous rules, they feel softer. And that's going to be something that you need to help Susie figure out. And during the interview process with the house, figure out, what did that interview feel like? Does that person feel that you'd be working with, did they feel regimented, or do they feel softer? What is more likely to be more productive for you? Charles and Bob kind of come as a pair. Charles is a 30-year-old male with identified addiction to methamphetamine, and he's married to Bob, who's a 65-year-old male who states his biggest problem is with alcohol, but he'll try anything. Charles has 2 children under 8 years old and has visitation, but has not been consistent with visitation. He lives in Concord and will go anywhere as long as it is with Bob. Charles needs support with finance issues. He has back child support, he's got fines, those sort of things. He needs support with MAT, mild mental health issues, and work. It is his 8th time through a recovery house. Bob, on the other hand, has no children and wants to stay with Charles. He identifies need for support with relationships, IOP, work, and health issues. It is his 15th time through a recovery house. So take some time, see what you can find. Don't be afraid to look outside of New Hampshire for a house that might accommodate Charles and Bob. Considerations. There are no certified recovery houses in New Hampshire for couples. Maine does have a certified house for couples. There may be others across the country. If Charles and Bob are willing to really seriously locate, it might be worth taking some time to see if you can find a house for married couples. It's not likely in New Hampshire that any house would accommodate both Charles and Bob together because of their relationship. However, most houses would accommodate each person individually. And the relationship is the marriage. It's the wanting to be together as a couple. It's not the type of couple, houses don't accommodate couples. If they're going to stay in New Hampshire, determine what is the healthy distance for the couple where they can each fully concentrate on their personal recovery needs while maintaining the relationship. That seems to be the biggest consideration in this situation. Kathy, AKA George. Kathy is a 40-year-old person who identifies as gender fluid. Kathy lives in Goffstown and has one male child, age 15, who lives temporarily with a friend in Goffstown. Kathy wants to stay in Goffstown because of a solid church connection. Kathy identifies addiction to alcohol and identifies needed supports in childcare, recovery coaching, financial coaching, a get well job, and sustainable employment. Pause the video and see what supports you can find and houses that are near the proper supports for Kathy. Considerations. Goffstown / Manchester have a lot of supports. So Kathy's already in a good location. The support of the church is also probably very important for Kathy. That's the fellowship piece that is critical. So most houses will be accommodating for somebody who identifies as gender fluid. That's typically not a problem. I think there are a lot of choices in Goffstown and or Manchester for Kathy. A different scenario, Chris. Chris is a 27-year-old male police officer from Nashua. He has 2 children under the age of 7 who live with his wife. Chris does not want to be housed in Manchester. He has identified addiction to alcohol and needs support with work training and wants a short recovery house stay. He has leave from work for recovery. Pause the video and search through for appropriate housing. So considerations. Again, should Chris be housed out of state? I'm sorry, I did a couple typos on that one. For a short period of time. Chris is in a profession that might have other considerations, and it might be that Chris should be at a different type of recovery housing in another state. There are recovery houses across the United States for first responders and for police officers and for specifically designed for different professions. When looking at that, what is the proper distance for maintaining Chris's family relationships? What support services does his work provide, and where are those located? And it appears that Chris won't be working while he's at the recovery home, but he has to be in a New Hampshire NHCORR Certified recovery home. He must be actively engaged during the day. So what would that look like for Chris? Is that going to be training during the day? Is that going to be volunteer work? That is part of being in a recovery home. So there are a lot of considerations for Chris. Maybe Chris would be fine up in Littleton. Maybe no one knows what his job is. But that's also hiding things. Is that necessarily the healthiest way to be in a recovery home? There's a lot of considerations for how Chris should find the appropriate home. And Louise. Louise is a 29-year-old woman who currently lives in Concord. She has 3 children, ages 7, 8, and 9, who live in Concord with the father. Louise does not have custody, doesn't typically have contact, and she'd like to be anywhere but Concord. She identifies addiction to alcohol and methamphetamines. She needs support with general health, dental, nutrition, general mental wellness, employment, reunification, traditional 12-step program, and physical well-being. So again, pause the video and see what you find for recovery housing for Louise. So considerations for Louise. Louise appears to be looking for a significant amount of guidance and structure. So some houses provide more structure than others. take some time to talk with different house owners, to look at their websites and identify houses that have more strict requirements, including work, curfews, meetings, etc. They are more likely to provide more structure and support. But it also needs to balance with Louise's personality. There are a significant number of appropriate houses for Louise in Littleton, in Laconia, over in the Seacoast area, and down in Nashua or Manchester that can provide the amount of guidance that Louise appears to be looking for. And again, all houses are likely to accommodate reunification support with for their residents, as long as you're working with somebody that's outside of the community. And I think Frank is the last one. Frank is a 32-year-old person identifying as female who also identifies with addiction to opioids. Frank does not have any children, is from Laconia, and would like to stay in Laconia. Frank identifies a need for support for health concerns, work, car, license, and ID, Medicaid, professional acting connections, reunification with parents, school, and starting a business. Frank has a long list of things she would like to work on. So take a look in the Laconia area and see what options might be available for Frank. Considerations. Again, I think it's important to recognize that most houses, although we don't have any specifically classified LGBTQ+ houses, most houses will accommodate Frank's self-identification. So search for a house for women. There are many options in Laconia. And it's important that Frank found housing near supportive services while she gets her license, her ID, her car, her job set up. Laconia is a very supportive community. Frank will also need coaching support to achieve the list of goals she has created. So she does have a long list of goals, and she definitely is going to need some sort of support for figuring out how to structure those goals, how to attain a few, and then start moving on to new goals. And that is the last person on this list. And I'm hoping that has helped you figure out how to assist clients in finding the right recovery house, the best match. The more that you investigate houses, the more that you learn about the individual houses, the better matches you're going to make for people, the more successful people are likely to be.